The first time the rancher did it, the wind was dead still. The kind of silence that makes a town feel watched by God himself. And every man, woman, and child in Red Hollow knew something was wrong before they ever saw it. His name was Clay Mercer, a man carved out of dust and scars, a rancher who owned more land than most men owned courage. And when he stepped into the middle of Main Street just after sundown, boots echoing against dry wood, the town felt its spine tighten. People leaned out of windows. Curtains shifted. A saloon door froze halfway open. Clay didn't care. That was the problem. He stopped right there, beneath the hanging oil lamp that painted his face in fire and shadow, and did the one thing everyone had begged him not to do. "Don't," someone whispered from a porch. "Clay, someone might see." He heard it. He always heard them, and he did it anyway. He reached into his coat, slow, deliberate, not for a gun, not for a bottle, but for something far more dangerous, the truth. When he pulled it out and raised it for the whole town to witness, a ripple of disbelief tore through Red Hollow like a gunshot. This wasn't just defiance. This was humiliation. This was exposure. This was Clay Mercer, tearing the town's secrets out into the open with his bare hands. Years earlier, they had taken something from him. Not land, not money, but dignity, and they thought time had buried it. They were wrong. Clay had waited. He'd watched them smile at him in church, shake his hand at auctions, whisper behind his back in the saloon. Tonight was the night he reminded them who he was. Faces went pale. A woman gasped and covered her mouth. A man cursed under his breath. The sheriff took one step forward, then stopped, knowing if he moved now, the town would fracture beyond repair. Clay's voice cut through the silence, low and steady, the voice of a man who had already survived the worst. He said just enough to let everyone understand exactly what they were seeing, and that was when panic set in. Doors slammed. Children were pulled inside. Old grudges clawed their way back to the surface. Because if Clay Mercer was willing to do this in public, there was no telling what he would do next. Memories flooded back. The fire at the North Barn, the missing ledger, the night Clay's wife disappeared and the town pretended not to notice. They had told him to keep quiet back then, too. For his own good. For the town's peace. And he had, until now. Clay turned slowly, meeting the eyes of every neighbor who had ever judged him, threatened him, or benefited from his silence. The message was clear without being spoken. "I know what you did, and I'm done protecting you." Somewhere behind him, someone finally screamed for him to stop. "Don't!" "Someone might see!" They cried again, louder this time, desperate. Clay almost smiled. That was the point. He wanted them to see. He wanted the whole damn world to see, because once a secret is seen, it can never be buried again. And as the oil lamp flickered above him, casting long shadows that twisted across the street like guilty thoughts, Red Hollow realized this wasn't a scandal. This was the beginning of a reckoning. Clay slipped the truth back into his coat, tipped his hat, and walked away as the town erupted behind him. Arguments breaking out, accusations flying, old alliances collapsing in seconds. And while chaos swallowed the street, Clay Mercer disappeared into the darkness, knowing the hardest part wasn't what he'd just done. It was what he was about to do next. If this story has you hooked already, if you feel that tension tightening in your chest, make sure you subscribe now, because what happens next doesn't just shock the town, it destroys it. By sunrise, Red Hollow was no longer a town. It was a rumor eating itself alive. Word of what Clay Mercer had done spread faster than fire in dry grass, twisting as it moved from porch to porch, from the church steps to the saloon tables, until no two versions sounded the same, but every single one carried fear. Men who had stood tall the night before now avoided the street. Women whispered behind doors bolted tight. Even the children felt it, that heavy wrongness in the air, the sense that something sacred had been cracked open and left bleeding in public. Clay did not show himself that morning. That only made it worse. When a man does something unforgivable and then vanishes, the imagination does the rest. The sheriff tried to restore order, but his voice lacked conviction and the town knew it. He knew what Clay had revealed meant more than embarrassment. It meant consequences. By noon, the first accusation was spoken out loud. And once it was, there was no taking it back. A merchant swore the rancher was trying to destroy the town out of revenge. A ranch hand muttered that Clay was only telling the truth too late. A preacher warned that public sin invites public punishment. And beneath all of it ran the same unspoken question. What else does he know? Because Clay Mercer had always watched more than he spoke. He remembered faces, dates, who left town suddenly and who never returned. Years ago, when Clay's wife vanished without so much as a scream, the town had told itself a comfortable lie, that she ran off, that she couldn't handle ranch life, that it wasn't anyone's business. Clay had been warned not to ask questions, not to dig. Don't, they'd told him then too. Someone might see. And now they were seeing everything. Late that afternoon, Clay finally appeared at the edge of town, sitting tall in his saddle, calm as if nothing had changed, while Red Hollow stared back like a cornered animal. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence alone set men arguing and alliances snapping. Someone threw the first insult. Someone else threw a stone. It missed, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the permission it gave. Suddenly voices rose, fists clenched, and the fragile order the town had pretended to have for years shattered in minutes. The sheriff tried to arrest Clay, not because he'd broken a law, but because the town needed a target. Clay didn't resist. That terrified them more than if he had. As he was led through the street, people shouted at him to stop, to take it back, to keep quiet like before. One woman cried, begging him not to ruin everything. Clay finally looked at her, eyes hollow and steady, and said words that froze the crowd where they stood. Everything was already ruined. You just didn't want to admit it. By nightfall, Red Hollow split clean in two, those who wanted Clay silenced forever, and those who feared what would happen if he was. Secrets have weight, and when too many are buried in one place, the ground eventually breaks. That night, someone tried to burn Clay's ranch. Someone else broke into the records office. A witness vanished. And in the jail cell, Clay Mercer sat alone, listening to the town tear itself apart exactly the way he knew it would. Because he wasn't finished. What he'd shown them was only proof that he could. What he planned to reveal next would make sure no one ever told him don't again. And if you think this story ends quietly, you're wrong. This is the moment it becomes unforgettable. Subscribe now, because Chapter 3 is where everything explodes. The dawn came like a thief in Red Hollow, gray and soft at first, but quickly turning sharp, slicing through the broken windows and cracked boards of the town like the truth itself. Clay Mercer didn't wait for permission, didn't wait for anyone to soften their gaze or steal their courage. By sunrise, he was already walking down Main Street, boots kicking dust into the air, eyes cold and unflinching. The town had not slept. No one could. Whispers of the night's chaos had raced like wildfire through every house and barn. Some townsfolk thought he would be gone by now, leaving them to rebuild what had been shattered. They were wrong, because Clay Mercer was about to finish what he had begun. The first person to see him this morning was old Mrs. Callahan, who had lived in Red Hollow long enough to remember the town before its lies grew thick like weeds. She froze when he stopped outside her home, tipped his hat, and said nothing. And in that silence, she understood. Everyone else would learn the same way, by watching. Clay reached the center of the town square, where the remnants of last night's chaos still smoldered. A wagon wheel charred black, a fence splintered, papers flying like frightened birds. He set his coat down on the ground, deliberately, ceremoniously. Then he pulled from it the object that had haunted the town for years, the ledger. The proof of every deceit, betrayal, and crime that had been whispered behind closed doors and buried under polite smiles. The sheriff, who had thought himself in control, staggered forward, hand shaking, realizing that the law had no power here. Clay's voice, low and commanding, carried through the morning air, and when he spoke, it wasn't accusation or anger. It was truth. Names, dates, actions, all read aloud with a calm precision that left the town paralyzed. Friends looked at friends in disbelief. Husbands and wives, neighbors, business partners. All the secrets they had trusted would remain hidden were now bared, and every lie reflected like a mirror in their own faces. A scream erupted from the saloon. A man fell to his knees, shaking, muttering apologies to ghosts no one else could see. Women clutched each other, trying to stop trembling that had no source but fear itself. Children, some too young to understand, sensed the collapse of safety and whimpered. Clay Mercer didn't flinch. He had waited for this moment for decades, and now, finally, the town could see what he had known all along, that they were fragile, dishonest, and cowardly, and that their protection of appearances had cost him everything he had loved. Hours passed. Sunlight climbed higher, illuminating every guilty face, every shattered pride. And when he was done, Clay folded the ledger carefully, as if the weight of truth itself demanded reverence, and tucked it back into his coat. Then he did something no one expected. He walked past the town in complete silence, leaving them to stare at each other, to process, to face the full consequences of their lives exposed. There was no applause, no relief. Only the stunned quiet of a town forced to confront itself. That was the power Clay Mercer wielded, not violence, not wealth, not fear, but the unflinching, unbearable clarity of truth. And the people of Red Hollow would carry the memory of that day forever. When the last shadow fell across the square, and Clay disappeared beyond the hills as silently as he had arrived, one thought lingered in every mind. Don't ever underestimate him. Don't ever hide again. Because if Clay Mercer sees, everyone will know. And that, my friends, is why stories like this keep you awake, keep you wondering, and keep you coming back for more. If you felt the tension, the shock, the chaos of Red Hollow, hit subscribe now, because there are more tales where Clay Mercer walks the line between law and legend, and you don't want to miss a single second.